People buy technology to hit metrics. It's true, and the metric that many, especially very large companies, that deploy tons of money. The metric that those companies want to hit is number of MQLs and cost per MQL. Still, and so when you do that, what do? You go out and buy technology that promises ways that you can lower your cost per lead and have more scale to it. And so you get content syndication, people buying metadata or running lead gen campaigns through metadata or even natively on these channels.
The only way to reach buyers is through the voices that surround them. The future of go-to-market is about surrounding buyers with who. The future is nearbound. Introducing Jared Fuller's book, Nearbound and the Rise of the Who Economy. Join us live from Paris on February 27th for the virtual book launch. Register at www.nearboundbook.com. We'll see you there.
All right, we're back at last. Welcome to the Nearbound podcast. Isaac is severely depressed, but I'm extremely happy because I have a very special guest today. Isaac, I've been pulling at this string probably way too much. You feeling any better this week? Oh, I just lost your audio. How did that happen? How do we roll?
How did that happen?
Oh, there we go. Are we back? I think I just literally accidentally clicked mute. Probably because I didn't want to answer that question. I am not any better. I don't know if I will ever recover from the Lions losing that game the way that they did, unless and until they win a Super Bowl. So you got to help me overcome my depression with a good conversation today.
Well, we have the best possible conversation. We're here with the gadfly of demand gen, the Chris Walker himself. Chris, welcome to the Nearbound podcast, my man.
Thanks for the intro, guys. Really happy to be on the podcast and looking forward to talking about this.
You know, Jared, it's funny as we started putting together kind of like, what is this Nearbound narrative? From the very beginning, we've talked about this big shift from the how economy to the who economy, where the dominant question buyers are asking is not, how do I solve X? Because there's just too many answers and like too many good answers. It's just overwhelmed with information. And so people are kind of reverting to who can help me? Who can I go to? If I go Google, what's the best ABM software tool? It's just, I'm going to be overwhelmed. I'm not going to be able to navigate it. So instead, I'm going to find somebody I trust and be like, hey, do you use any tools for ABM? And as we were putting this whole narrative together last year and kind of getting this, every time I thought about this, giving people examples, I think the number one person I used as an example was you, Chris, because I think about when I hear the word dark social or when I hear demand creation, I have no idea if you were the first one to say those, but you're the one who comes to mind because you have been in my LinkedIn feed delivering me really quality videos and content every week or multiple times a week for a long, long time. And I trust you because I've heard you share it. I trust you. So I would go to you or someone who works for you if I was like, okay, it's time for me to start upping my game when it comes to dark social or demand creation, or how do I measure my attribution properly? And I think it's such a great example. Like I would not go and Google that because I wouldn't trust the results. But you've built trust. And I'm guessing from what I've heard, this is how you have driven a ton of your business just by becoming a trusted voice. So I think that's like kind of front and center in this whole nearbound era is who people are looking for that person. And I just want to know to kick us off, like, did you stumble upon that or did you deliberately say, I've got to be, as a person, I've got to become a trusted voice if I want to get business? Or was that just like, I'll put videos out there and all of a sudden you realize the power of it?
When I started my company in 2019, it had been apparent to me for almost a half decade that the way that B2B buyers are getting information and making decisions and validating those decisions and deciding what to prioritize, where they get information around all those things was fundamentally changing. And if you set out to build your company in 2019 or even right now, a lot of executives or founders would look at how the world used to work or what was proven, quote unquote, proven to work 10 years ago, a la the predictable revenue model or a high volume lead gen model or a lot of the things that people stumble into at early stage companies. And to me, it was like just basically a strategic decision when you think about how are we going to get the market to understand the things that we believe in, the value that we can offer to build trust with them, that putting content inside of social networks was the number one way to be able to get that done. not cold calling people, hoping that they can get them into a meeting with me when nobody knew about me in 2019. And so I think that to me, it was a strategic choice of how are we going to get people to know about us and how are we going to get customers, and just looking at it in how the world works at the present day, not how the world used to work or what the traditional playbook says to do.
Yeah, it's so funny. I've learned because in 2013 I started a company and I was on the B2C side, and I basically similarly all I did was just create a ton of content and primarily distribute it through at the time Facebook, because
I remember.
This was young people trying to convince them to go do this year-long It was more like B2B than most B2C in that it was like a $12,000 decision. There's a year-long commitment, but I didn't do any of the like traditional marketing stuff. It all came because people heard me on a podcast, read something that I wrote, heard this content, and were like, okay, let me come in and talk to this person. So I had built the whole company that way. Fast forward a couple years ago, Jared convinces me to come over into B2B land. And I just came in assuming, well, B2B land, thank goodness you got all these marketing plays and you just run those and it works. But I don't know how to do those. That's the bad part. I'm like, I don't know how to run this. And Jared's like, no, you don't understand. The kind of stuff you were already doing, that's where B2B is going. It's just a little behind, like the same plays, the media, the becoming becoming an authoritative voice. It's not quite just brand marketing, like putting up billboards, but it's like this trust building thing. So it was really cool for me to it's like I started wrong. I kept thinking I needed to learn everything differently and change all my habits, but I kind of found out slowly, no, actually those same things, that's what works here. So I don't know. There seems to be a little bit of a lag between B2C and B2B.
I think I estimate it to be somewhere between 3 and 7 years, depending on the thing, where basically a B2C company will do something, and then 3 to 7 years later, a B2B company will do it, regardless of whether it was good or bad for the B2C company.
That is a great point.
So you had influencer, super popular Instagram influencer, 2015, 2016, 17, all the way forward in B2C. Now you got B2B companies that are like actually considering some type of influencer strategy in more than just like the 1% of companies. It's starting to happen a little bit more broadly, but we're not even fully there yet. You got like companies, B2C companies have been using some type of like internal marketing mix modeling for a long time. And now you see like people trying to bring that into B2B. And I will say that if you look at most of the Fortune 500 CPG brands that use marketing mix modeling, they're declining in market share. And that's, I think when you think about MMMs, I think that's one of the things that's going to come into marketing in B2B that's already shown that it doesn't work in B2C. And then they're going to bring it into B2B and learn that it doesn't work over here too. It just incentivizes a bunch of the wrong stuff, and you can tune it. So, we get basically the MMs incentivize like reach and frequency at the lowest CPM cost. And that that is not the way that you actually advertise and build a company. So those are a couple of examples, but I totally agree with you. I think that B2B lags behind B2C. And if you look at B2C right now, it'll predict the future generally about where we're headed in B2B, for better or worse.
You know what's funny? I used to.
I want to drop in one more point. I just think it's so fascinating. I'm sorry I forgot this, but in B2C, you've already seen tons rapid commoditization of most consumer products. You have the things happening in China where you can now white label and private label directly from manufacturing. You see a ton of channel conflict happening between DTC and their retailers and things like that. All that stuff's starting to happen in B2B too. You have the cost of software development's going way down. You have a lot of product and feature parity and things like that. You have categories that are incredibly crowded with lower cost competitors coming in. You have price, commoditization happening. You have channel conflict, but in channel conflict in B2B, it's the conflict between marketing and sales and partner and that type of channel conflict, not necessarily between the retailer and the direct to consumer, but it's all about the channel. In B2C, it's just the channel, whether it's retail, distribution, direct to consumer, and then you have the channels inside of B2B, which is partner, quote unquote marketing, sales, website, etc. So I think those are a couple of other interesting points that people may not see directly when they think about the comparison between B2B and B2C, but something that I've been thinking about.
I know Jared wants to take this in another direction, but I have to just make a little funny observation first. When you said it's 3 to 7 years B2B kind of starts following the trends set by B2C, whether they're good or bad. Probably another 5 years after that, then nonprofits start to follow the trend. And then like 10 years later, government agencies start. And by that time, it's only the bad tactics that are being used.
Yeah. Circa 2030, we'll start to see influencer marketing and political campaigns, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Stuff like that, running for local races. Well, one thing I wanted to not necessarily challenge you on, Chris, but maybe unpack with how Isaac framed kind of the who economy narrative is the whole influencer thing. Like, it seems a little bit like a flash in the pan in B2B. Like, we saw it and then it kind of, I feel like it's fizzled to some degree. I mean, there's obviously still companies doing this, but there is a word that's tangential that I think ties maybe both things together. I'd like your opinion on, which is evangelism, which is basically taking, and I'm guilty of it. Isaac's guilty of it. Like, we brought Joe Rowley in, right? And she's helping us in a ton of different ways, produce content, show up in the places, but she's also getting on calls, right? She's talking to customers. She's doing more than that. And then we'll obviously distribute some content with her. Why? Because our buyers trust her. So influencer marketing vis-a-vis evangelism, is there a nuance? Is there a difference in your opinion? Or are Isaac and I really dumb for bringing on Joe?
I mean, I think that, like, in terms of flash in the pan, I don't think we ever saw like influencer marketing really like coming through. I think that it's starting to pick up in pockets, obviously with the pressure in the economy and marketing budgets. Like, that's one of the first line items that are getting cut is the influencer budget. So I can see why they're declining, but I'm getting way more inbound right now for people trying to do quote unquote like influencer deals, content collaboration with me than I ever have. And so that's just a sample size of one, but something that I'm seeing in terms of picking up and companies maybe thinking a little bit differently about it. When I think about the difference between, like, I've been looking at influencer, key opinion leader, and evangelist as actually three different things. I think an evangelist typically sits in your company,
right?
Just like Jill, or like me,
right?
As an evangelist typically sits in your company. A key opinion leader is somebody that has leading thoughts that then participates with you in the messaging strategy, the product strategy, what are the best ways to use the product, that also have the distribution and promotion. I would be a key opinion leader for an ABM tool, or maybe for, a nearbound tool or something. I could be a key opinion leader. And then you have an influencer, which is typically like a one-off or an ad hoc thing where we're paying for distribution. We're paying for someone to distribute our message through their channels, whether that's newsletter, things like that. I just like the distinction because we group it all into newsletter or into influencer. And so thinking about it in core buckets, I think where people really need to gravitate towards is in the key opinion leader and evangelist space, because they're long-term. They're long-term partnerships, one being external, one being internal, where those people are invested in the growth of the company and hopefully the financial outcomes of that company over a very long period of time. And when you have that long-term view, you do a lot of the right things. Where in one-off influencer campaigns, oftentimes you do a lot of the wrong things because it's a short-term thing that you're trying to drive a short-term result for, so you can get another ad hoc post and make another $500. That a la like UTM tracking, some type of DR, like direct response conversion on your influencer thing. Typically not like, not the best performing content that you could put in an Instagram story or a LinkedIn post or a podcast live read or something like that. So
it kind of reminds me
generally how I think about the distinction.
Jared, you mentioned like, oh, maybe it came and it went. I think there's sort of like a curve to these things that at first, all of a sudden you get like the front of the hype cycle where everybody tries to do it badly. And then most of them fail. And then like, I remember in the early days, it was like, Twitter, we got to hire. Yeah. We got to hire a bunch of interns to start tweeting. And then, that didn't work. But like people who were really consistent. And so I think you see this with the influencer thing. In fact, I just saw a thing about the CEO of some stove company. They tried to do this like influencer thing with Snoop Dogg for like their no smoke stove or something. And like the campaign went viral, but apparently it didn't help them sell any stoves. Probably not a good ICP overlap, right? But it's like, everybody's doing influencer. We got to do influencer. So everybody does influencer. And then most are like, well, that didn't work. But I think you really like the people who are doing it well and doing it seriously, that next phase where it's more than just a trend, because consumers actually hate it when they can tell you're just trend jacking, right? Like it doesn't feel genuine. Like
trend jacking,
right? Like, let's just go find the biggest name we can and be like, Taylor Swift advocates for reveal. Like, what the hell does that mean? Right? Like that doesn't make any sense. So hopefully we're getting beyond the bad version of B2B chasing after influencers.
And it follows sort of the nearbound methodology when you think about key opinion leader. Like, you want to identify, and I did this when I worked at a medical device company in 2016. It was, who are the people that are speaking at the conferences to our target customer? Who are the people that produce content for the internet that our customers consume? Who are the people that make the clinical workflows and guidelines that all the other hospitals follow? And you listen to that, and you have a hand, like 5 or 10 people in a space, and you say, these 5 or 10 people drive the clinical practice, what products are used in this space across the entire market. How do we get our product in their hands? How do we get them to collaborate on content with us? How do we get them to produce a webinar for us that's about how they use it? If they're successful, how do we get them to think about the best practices so that they teach our customers their best practices rather than our customer success team trying to make it up? I just think there's so many benefits to that, and that's a strategy tried and true in pharma, medical device for decades. I think we'll see more. I hope we see more of it in SaaS because it just makes perfect sense.
It's just like inserting one additional question that often doesn't get inserted when you're going through your sort of go-to-market exercises. Like, okay, who's the ICP? What's the pain point? What's our value prop? And then what channels are we going to reach them with? Adding in that question, who should they be hearing it from? Because it's not always us, right? And you just add that in, and sometimes the answer is you, but sometimes there's someone else that surrounds them that you should be going through. And like that little question can really start to crack things open.
I love that too, because it ties back to Chris, one of Isaac and my favorite marketing hacks, which is like the open form text field. How did you hear about us? We've changed it to who sent you our way, because you actually technically get names even more, right? So who sent you our way? It'll be a company name. It might be an event, but a lot of times it's a person. And then that person is like at some thing or some place that we don't have any partnership there. Why did they send that? Like, that's just such a great reason to start a conversation that might have some nearbound-esque legs, even if you're not signing any formal partner agreements. And that's kind of it's been an interesting trend that I've seen, is that a lot of the partner folks are really trying to like stuff relationships, network, having a good network into like these rigid old school agreements. Like, oh, there's not 25% revenue share. It's like, there's not a SaaS account executive in the world, or a content marketing manager, or a customer success manager that gives two shits about your company's, revenue share. But if you have a good relationship and they're sending people your way, why wouldn't you nurture that? Right? Like, you're not scared to create content with other people. And I'd say a lot of the times you probably have no commercial relationship behind that. Obviously, if it's like a software vendor directly trying to monetize, your message and your voice, you have every right to. But I think for the most part, that's what so many people are missing today, is that, who should be hearing from us, and then who sent you our way, is that feedback loop. I'm curious, Chris, if in all the clients that you've kind of been working and advised kind of that strategy on, do you see that stuff come back in? Because we see what, Isaac, roughly 50% is being sent from a person or a company or a partner whenever we ask that question in our forms.
Yeah, when we ask, how did you hear about us, which is like sort of our design to keep it's more inclusive of everything. I think that both questions have merit, by the way. When we ask it, I would say that, it's tough to, in our own data, let's just start with that. In our own data, I think it's probably 25-30% word of mouth. Sometimes we get names, sometimes we don't. We group it all into word of mouth. If they say colleague, friend, this exact person's name, this company's name just gets aggregated into word of mouth as one bucket. 25-30%, I think, are saying that on our own forms. I think that B2B companies could get, you get former customers. I used to be a customer, now I've moved jobs, and now I have that. You get, this person sent me your way. You get some that are related to the channel. I saw you on this channel. I heard about you in this community or at this event. And so word of mouth broadly, I think, is a big driver. Companies that don't ask that question just think that word of mouth doesn't exist and that their Google ads are what's being most successful, because they just don't take the time to collect some simple data to see that type of stuff. And so, I believe it's really important to understand who are the people that are sending you business, and then are there opportunities to be able to expand that, to be able to have them send you more business, for them to be incentivized to send you business, for instance, or other things like that. You got to have the data first. Like, most companies just don't even think it's happening right now.
Perfect. I was about to ask you that question. So, like, what do you do with that information? It would seem silly not to do anything with it. But first and foremost, you got to have the data. And it was funny because right now I'm putting the finishing touches, much to Isaac's chagrin, on Nearbound the book. So it's the first full feature book.
The
really
chagrin,
excited.
The chagrin is not that you're finishing it; it's that it's not finished yet. Let's just make that clear.
Yes. To be clear, and in the Nearbound marketing chapter, it's my favorite chapter. It's probably my favorite work I've ever done, and I actually shout you out a couple times in it, Chris, and some of the work that you've done, and just say like, "Hey, Chris has talked about this. Here's an example." And one of the things that I was kind of talking about is like, if marketing teams are looking at the old way and their unit economics, I haven't seen any new data. I can't imagine that it's gotten better since that metadata study that you referenced in the super mega viral LinkedIn post. And I'm going to read it for those folks that aren't here. Just to summarize Chris's words from the metadata, it was the 2022 report. He said the average cost per lead was $172 across all lead gen campaigns. And again, this is on social, right, Chris? Paid social?
Paid social. And this is like aggregated. I don't know. They don't say the exact number of companies, but it was like $45 or $50 million in spend and hundreds of thousands of leads. So this is not a small
Correct.
study or a one-off case study with one company. This is what's happening in the market for companies that use metadata, which could be in some ways be a biased sample that they use the product just for scientific purposes. But yeah, this is what the data
still surprised me that they even put this out, because if it was only their customers, it really did surprise me because, Chris said, given the low win rate of these deals, we estimate advertising CAC, so customer acquisition cost, to be $57,000 to win one deal. That's just the advertising cost, doesn't include sales headcount, SDRs, marketing headcount, or other marketing programs such as events. It's safe to say that this performance is totally unacceptable. I couldn't have said it any better. It's absolutely horrific that would have been status quo. That's the average from people spending money on paid social and doing so with best in class tech. And I won't throw any vendor under the bus. Well, where the heck are other people looking? Like, how do marketers continue to throw money at that given, hey, here's the data from the vendors with a large sample size? Like, where the heck is the wake up call?
People buy technology to hit metrics. And it's true. And the metric that many, especially very large companies that deploy tons of money, the metric that those companies want to hit is number of MQLs and cost per MQL still. And so when you do that, what do? You go out and buy technology that promises ways that you can lower your cost per lead and have more scale to it. And so you get content syndication, people buying metadata or running lead gen campaigns through metadata or even natively on these channels. People buy technology to hit metrics that they are assigned. And so when I look at this, I actually look at it as a much higher order go-to-market issue. I don't look at it solely as a marketing issue. I think about how companies think about how they generate revenue, and then, segregate marketing to, we need to get a bunch of leads so that our sales team, our SDR team has email addresses and phone numbers to call, regardless of the quality or the intent of those buyers. And so I just look at it as that tactic is one of the quote unquote poster child of why go-to-market is broken, because the metrics incentivize that behavior. And then you see the downstream impact on actual revenue and cost of acquisition, just leading to a program that will never scale. And a lot of companies are running into seeing those issues right now, where they got to 50 or 100 million and the machine's starting to break because they have a 6-year payback on some of the places where they spend the most money.
6-year payback. Oh my gosh.
It's not made up, by the way. It's like, it's crazy to think about, but direct lead gen channels, I don't know if there's a CAC payback in that one. But they had an annual contract value in the data.
You estimated one.
Yeah, what was it?
57,000 was your estimate.
Yeah, but then you need the deal size to get the payback. I'm not sure if they had it in there, but let's just pretend. I'm guessing it's a $20,000-$30,000 average annual contract value. So then you're at 3 years on the marketing program expense, but then you have marketing headcount, you have all the other programs you're running marketing, you have SDRs, and you have sales resources. So that's at least double. So you're talking 6 years on some of the it's not uncommon to see 5 to 8 year direct CAC payback on these lead gen programs.
Chris, I think a lot of progress is starting to be made in terms of fixing these attribution problems, which are driving all of this, malinvestment. At least here's my experience on the top and on the bottom of the funnel or the buyer life cycle. The middle seems really difficult. So I'll give you an example. Like we had a big spend on paid social, and I just killed it down to zero when I started and did not harm bottom of the funnel at all. In fact, bottom of the funnel is doing great. Top of the funnel, it was down for a little bit, but we put all of our resources on more demand creation type stuff, very much evangelizing the category, a lot of content, educational stuff, events. And what we saw with that, especially with some of the things like the free form, How Did You Hear, which is my favorite idea I've taken from you. It's so simple. And then qualitative things like looking at call recordings. What are people saying? What are they mentioning? And then when deals close, asking reps, why did that deal close? We can see an impact on the top of the funnel. Oh, yeah, okay. When we do an event or whatever, we put out a lot of evangelism stuff. People are saying that that's what brought them here, a podcast, a LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. And then bottom of the funnel, reps are telling us that this deal closed because this person got really excited by this guide that we had or this event that we had and some of the content. The middle of the funnel is like really invisible. It's really hard for me to figure out. There's not even really good hacky ways like some of these qualitative ways of trying to measure the impact of the demand creation stuff at the top and at the bottom. I'm curious what you've seen there. Like, okay, somebody does a free sign up. 6 months later, maybe they're getting ready to close. How can I measure what's influencing them in that 6 months that's taking them from free user who's kicking the tires because they heard about it on a podcast to now I'm doing a demo and I'm ready to close? How can I like tie my marketing efforts to that middle of the funnel? That's been a big challenge for us. And I'm curious how you address that.
I think that the way that marketers specifically, but now it's starting to bleed into like other executive roles, look at what we call marketing attribution today as a linear set of digital trackable touch points where the first touch is so important and the last touch is so important. And then we can decide if we use a U shape where it gives no credit to the middle, or we use a W shape where it gives 33% to the middle, not recognizing that it actually has it really doesn't have a lot of bearing on the impact of the touch. And I think we need to start leaning a lot less into what time or what sequence these actions happened and try and better deduce what were the impactful things. I think that most companies, when they use that type of model, run into either data overload or no data, one of the two. Companies that use a touch point influence model and their team gets based off it will have a fuckload of touch points. And then they'll look at it and they won't know what to do about it. And just because someone downloaded your ebook 3 years ago and then became a customer 3 years later, does that actually say much about the impact of the ebook? No, we make an assumption that because it was the first touch, that it was so impactful. It could have just been a lead gen program. They could have never read the PDF. They were just in your database now. And I think so. I think the way we look at first touch, last touch, how we apply a time sequence attribution model against those touch points is something that we should really challenge. I just don't. You're running into an issue in terms of not finding it useful. I think it's because it's for a reason that may not be the optimal way to even look at it. So I recommend a lot of paradigm shift thinking, especially when I see a lot of people struggle with the same issue. And at some point you have to think, like, challenge the first principles. Why do we do this in the first place? Maybe there's a whole different way that we need to look at it in order to get to the root of this now, especially how quickly the internet is maturing, how AI is evolving, how buyers are adapting to these types of changes and how they go about their decisions, how tracking and privacy policies continue to get more and more scrutiny, which gives companies less direct person level data. And there's just a ton of stuff changing. And then I don't have a perfect answer for you. I'm just sort of challenging people to think about if that's the right way to look at it in the first place.
Right.
I'm gonna the way that
ahead,
I'll talk through how it works for me. Right. Like most customers that end up becoming my customer, they discovered me somewhere, and then they consistently consume my message for a long period of time in one or two places. That's LinkedIn and a podcast. It's not, and neither of them gets measured by the time sequence digital attribution. and they're listening to 100 podcast episodes for 2 years, and then they change jobs, they go and get a CMO job, and the first thing that they do is call me. And so, like, one, digital strategies don't measure that appropriately, and they don't take into account the consistent action within one channel. It's not to me, it's more trying to discern not the like what time the action happened, it's what was the most impactful part of the action. I think you get a lot of that stuff through the stuff you've been asking about. When you ask customers directly, whether it's on a phone call, who sent us your way, how did you hear about us, a variety of other things that you can do to hear from your customers what's working. I think you get the cleanest data around the most impactful things that way. Not what happened first, not what happened last. We're not trying to fit it into a time sequence. What we're trying to figure out is, what did the customer remember? What did they find most impactful? People will say that it's biased and they're going to think about the last thing they did. I haven't found that in my experience. That I find that it's a great directional data point. Is it ever going to be quote unquote perfect? No, but I think, as you've mentioned, it leads to a lot of great directional insights that give you confidence to do things that nobody else is doing.
This is a great reminder too of maybe the limitations of being very, very heavily kind of ABM focused, because you don't take into account the time factor, like helping somebody learn about, marketing in your case for several years. They may not be a qualified lead for 2 years, and then all of a sudden they change jobs, and suddenly maybe they were at a place that had no budget to hire someone like you, but you were cultivating them, right? By not being so obsessed with hyper focusing on your market, you were putting out a message to a broader audience that people who are not in your market today, but a quick job change, all of a sudden they are. I just think that's a good reminder.
Well, and you mentioned channel too, and I think if I'm unpacking like what I call nearbound marketing, what I think is important, Chris, the way that my brain works when I think about that middle of the funnel, and just Isaac, let's talk a little bit about what we've done. So I'd actually like Chris's opinion on how we think about our own marketing and our own middle of funnel, because I think this is the remit that we're trying to take to partner leaders to go, if you're not talking to your CMO like this,
Chris is gonna send us an invoice after this episode.
Yeah, totally. Well, because is it good ideas or is it not for the market? And I think that partner leaders need to be doing things. There's probably 3 marketers I've learned the most from in modern SaaS. It's Dave Gerhardt, David Cancel, and Chris Walker, right? So like I was under Dave Cancel and Dave Gerhardt, and we got to do these things, right? And do things that don't scale. So one of those things was like, listen to gong calls, right? Right, to your point, like we're just manually going through and scraping gong calls for things like partner, agency, integration. And then what would Dave and the marketing team and us go do? Well, we would go and try to market with those people. Why? Well, because they have an audience, right? And that allowed us to build. Working. Right. It's already working, right? It's already proven in the data, right? We have the anecdotes. So like do the things that don't scale. You can put it in your forms. I think you could, scrape emails from an activity history. I think there is some data. It's qualitative. It's messy. There's no tech that makes it perfect. But when you have those anecdotes, then I think it's incumbent on the modern marketer to market with those people. And that's really been the thesis of Partner Hacker and then Nearbound and what we're doing at Reveal, Chris, is that everything that we do, we start with who are we taking to market this message with? Like that's so core to everything that we do. Like the Nearbound Summit, it was all about like, it wasn't just us blasting our list. It wasn't us. I mean, I think we tested like 1 or 2 LinkedIn promoted posts, like in all of the marketing for the summit, like didn't really work that well. Isaac's probably mad at me for it. But most of the great content came from collaborating and creating stuff with other people that we knew we wanted to create with. Are you seeing that as like, okay, this is a test that should be ran? Like, I still am not seeing people do that great. And maybe this because there's not a playbook yet. Are we just crazy and it happens to work for us, or should it work for other people?
I have one quick observation there, and maybe this, Chris, will factor into your answer of what you're seeing. But a lot of the best marketing that you see is marketers who are marketing to other marketers. Now, maybe I'm seeing that because I am a marketer, and so I'm in the market for that. And that's kind of where it's a little different, right? So like Chris can be the expert because his audience are people that he knows their job. He's done their job. If you are a marketer and you're selling to an ICP that's not marketers, the odds that you or someone on your team is the expert are basically zero. Yes. So like I don't know, I'm not the expert on partnerships, but we're selling partner tech. So I have to find who those experts are and partner with them, the people that my buyers do trust and listen to, because they're not going to listen to what I say. So like we're kind of forced into that position. And so I think that's maybe some of the difference when you see like HubSpot or some of these great content marketing machines that don't seem to partner as much, Jared, because they have in-house the people who influence their customer a lot more than if you're a marketing team selling into a different persona.
Yeah, but HubSpot could still benefit greatly by leveraging the key opinion leaders in the market to continue to, you know, grow their brand and their awareness and their differentiation amongst the crowded category and things like that. What I will say in my experience is that I feel like most companies still look at partnerships as purely an affiliate relationship,
Right.
and that like the idea of like having somebody that reaches hundreds of thousands of people, the exact people that you're going after, and giving them 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, the amount doesn't matter, compensating them to create information and then distribute that information, which benefits you to all their audience with the trust that they've built over years, that B2B companies are just like, no, like, when are you going to send me my first referral? And I find it incredibly fascinating, and would love your perspective on that afterwards about why we feel like we're still there. Yeah, why don't we go there, and then because there was
one quick follow up on that.
Yeah.
So that's a great point, and I think here's been my observation, Chris, and Isaac's seen me do this firsthand. Is like, this is another principle from David Cancel. He's like, make it incredibly easy for me to help you. Otherwise, don't ask. And it's just such low hanging fruit. So, for example, I'm happy to tell this and give away the secret. How did I get Jill Rowley, who has as many LinkedIn followers as Jason Lemkin, right? Like, it's big a name in my industry, and target persona CRO is available. Mm-hmm. Well, how did I get her to start posting about this and befriend her? Yeah, we had a history, but I also wrote the starting post or the opinion, and I tried to really do it in her voice, right? And then we've done that multiple times with multiple people. Make it easy for people to say yes. And this goes back to Isaac and I's original training ground in like the nonprofit world. We both started in direct mail nonprofit stuff. And anytime you do this, there was this principle, which is like, hey, the press release, write a press release so good for that reporter that they just print it verbatim. Right? Mm-hmm. So like, it's the same principle. Don't go ask someone to do the hard work for you. Assume all of the risk. They're not on your payroll. They don't get paid to do it, but make it incredibly easy to help. And it's just, to me, it's like, that's 101 stuff. I see almost no one do it. Certainly no one asks me, right? You get asked all the time. How many times do people send you stuff that's like, oh, that's something I would say. Happy to, shoot that note over to X person or to say it in that thing. To me, that's the biggest common, or at least common denominator that I see.
Chris, I've kind of wondered. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to hit the marketing to marketers or non-marketers thing, because I think I have an interesting perspective on that. Sure, like, it's benefited me as the owner of companies that primarily sell to marketers and go-to-market professionals, that I understand marketing and I'm a practitioner. It allows me to be the evangelist. But in my career, up until that point when I started my company, I never marketed to marketers. I marketed to respiratory therapists and medical directors and wastewater treatment professionals and ophthalmologists and optometrists and, senior living, like wellness directors, and a bunch of people that had nothing to do with marketing. And I think about it as an advantage in that situation, because that is when a true marketer, a marketer that operates on fundamentals, really wins. That part of it is understanding the subject matter and things like that. But there's a huge other part of it is being curious, listening to customers, building the strategy around that, segmenting properly, following the fundamentals, and then being able to plug in, whether it's an internal or set of external resources that then can communicate that perspective and positioning that you've sourced directly from customers. I just push again. People are like, oh, well, it's easy for you, Chris. You market to marketers. And it's like, for the first 10 years of my career, I never marketed to marketers and never made content about marketing. I had to convince our chief medical officer to come on the webinar and talk about what he was good at. And my job was to figure out who do we want to be on there to be the guest on the show? What channels are we going to distribute it in? Is it going to be paid and organic? How are we going to measure it? What's our email newsletter going to be about? How are we going to, so like, and those are interesting, like great marketing questions. You take out the subject matter expertise because it just relies on pure fundamentals.
Yeah, it's funny. Saying that someone markets to marketers does not mean to me they have an easier job, because nobody scrutinizes marketing more than marketers, and
It's
there's
true.
so much competition too. Yeah, it's interesting. I've kind of wondered if, again, it kind of comes back to this how and who economy. The principles, and you nailed it. Like, hey, if I focus on the principles of good marketing, I can market to anybody. You have the curiosity and you have those core principles. When it becomes about the tactics, I think a lot of marketers, especially in content marketing, the reason they haven't done a great job doing nearbound, pulling in the voices that surround their buyer, is because a lot of them were trained in how economy tactics. How do you construct things for SEO? How do you following those rules and tactics? And so they're thinking like search engine pleasing bots. Like, what do I need to do to serve the Google? Instead of thinking more like journalists. Pete Caputa talks about this. Hey, the modern content marketer is more of a journalist, frankly. Who do I need to go ask? If something happens in your town and you want everybody to know about it, what does a journalist do? I got to go figure out the 3 people to interview, and I got to put their voices. And I know, Jared, we kind of stumbled into this mostly because I didn't know anything about partnerships. When we launched Partner Hacker, it was like, what was our motto with all of our content? Make people famous. Make the people who are already respected by partnership professionals, make them famous. Put their voices out there, highlight them, find out what they're saying, amplify it, give it a voice. And I think that kind of curiosity, like, okay, here's a topic everyone seems to be interested in. I'll just go and research as a 25-year-old content marketer how to pack together an article that answers these questions and makes it to the top of Google. That shit is played out, right? Instead, who are 3 people that are actually really knowledgeable on this that probably don't have the time to sit down and write content? Can I just call them for 10 minutes and record the video and turn it into a handful of clips, make an article, put it into a newsletter, highlight it, make them famous.
And make them look good. Make them look good.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's the key.
It is the key. And we need to understand the shift, which is that in 2012, when a lot of SEO was picking up traction, there were no ways to access those people. You had to go and find them at a conference and hope, like, you couldn't send them a message. They didn't have a profile. They weren't posting content. None of that stuff existed. And then as that stuff has happened, fundamentally, the reason that people are going to the who instead of the Google search is because they trust the people. They trust the who more than the random, blog that's probably written in the Philippines or by AI that they find in Google. And that's just the fundamental shift. And it's funny when you were talking about that, I was almost getting goosebumps because I've literally been operating this way as a marketer since 2015. And it was a very unpopular strategy in 2015, 2016, 2017, things like that. Didn't get a lot of investment, got a lot of scrutiny. Let's just go hire another SDR. We should just, cut our territories in half and hire 10 more reps. And it just was, but when you think about the core fundamentals of we need to reach our customer, get them to trust us, get them to understand this information before they would ever consider meeting with our sales team, then you start to see this channel as the most effective way to get people interested in buying before they engage with sales.
And I think you nailed it too, Isaac, with the in bringing that together with, make them famous is about the quality of your marketing. So like, for example, your content editing, you're talking about fundamentals, Chris, like great copy trumps most things, right? Like great copy 101, like if you're going to go launch some new event, webinar, landing page, event thing, whatever it is, it could be a landing page, could be a new website, write the copy first. Copy first, great copy first, fundamentals. Are you a great writer? And then all that we're asking great writers is to go, hey, be curious about that other person's voice. Make it easy for them to speak about the topic, not about you, but about the topic, right? You have great design, great principles. Make them look good, right? Your production, make them feel like, oh, wow, I love working with this company. They make it so easy. And I think in B2B, the bar is so low for that because everyone wants what? Just like you said, Chris, going back to that point around everyone treats it like an affiliate marketing thing. Well, until you bring me value, and you're working for free, by the way, you don't work at my company, until you bring me that referral, until you bring me that close one deal, I'm going to treat you like garbage. Invert that. Treat them like royalty. And then guess what they do? They come back to you. They're always happy to help.
I'll tell you right now, any vendor that I am a customer of if you make some little video clip or image or whatever of me saying something that's relevant to your buyers and it makes me look awesome, I'm probably going to share that because I'm going to be like, ooh, that makes me look good. Okay, I'm going to share that, right? So like just keeping that in mind, like why would someone want to get in front of your buyers? Well, if you make them look good, if it actually help them, and that's just a slightly different shift of thinking about how to put together content.
I love it. It's a great way to bring it home. Chris has been getting goosebumps and nodding his head. Chris, this has been a blast, man. Thanks so much for hopping on and talking about things nearbound marketing. I can't wait for you to tear the nearbound marketing chapter apart whenever I get the book out. But any plugs from your side for what's happening? This will come out like probably the second week of February. Any plugs for the folks that are listening back at home?
I continue I continue to be very consistent in the places I am starting to launch and expand some strategies. So not necessarily that you just want to be the primary place that you consume my information, but I am getting more detailed into TikTok, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts, i.e. vertical short form video, the content medium that dominates the internet today. And so less of there's part of it learning and consuming there, but it's also part about studying someone in B2B and how they're approaching that from a strategy standpoint and a formatting and a length. And so if you're interested in just sort of seeing that stuff like TikTok or YouTube Shorts, Chris Walker 171, feel free to check those out. And you can always find me on LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, other places like that as well.
Yeah, your LinkedIn stuff is always great because I'm both learning directly from the content, but then also going to my team and being like, "Ooh, I noticed this little thing that Chris did with a video today. We should play around with that." So two levels of learning.
Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Isaac, I hope you're feeling better. We had the perfect thing to brighten up your week after the Lions lost. Chris Walker, everybody on the Nearbound podcast. If you're not following him, I meant it when I said it. I've learned more from probably 3 B2B marketers than anyone, DC, DG, and Chris Walker. So Nearbound, we'll see you around until next time on the Nearbound podcast.